Namaskar. Welcome to another episode of Editorial. Recently, in Jaipur, our Vice President Mr. Jagdeep Dhankar spoke about supremacy of judiciary versus the sovereignty of legislature. What he said judiciary cannot dominate legislature. Legislature has to dominate. Finally, we are a democracy, aren't we? He spoke the same in the Rajya Sabha. That's my topic for today. The question that I'm going to ask you today is he right? Because there are two sides of this coin. There is something what he said is right, and there is another side of the coin too. So let's discuss both these aspects of his statement, and then you decide what is right and what is wrong. Let's get right with the show. So, Vice President of India made this statement that, listen, you know what? Parliament mein sovereignty chahiye. So Parliament should have the sovereignty. Legislature should have the sovereignty. Judiciary cannot dominate over legislature. Now, on 7th of December, I will just read out a few statements which he made and then we will come to the point. On 7th of December, presiding over Rajya Sabha, for the first time on the opening day of winter session of the Parliament, Mr. Dhankar called striking down of NJAC, National Judiciary Appointment Commission Act. I have spoken about this a lot. I will attach the link to you in this very episode. National Judiciary Appointment Commission Act, a severe compromise of parliamentary sovereignty and disregard for the mandate of the people. He said, yaar, ye kaisa hota hai? Why should the people, that is the legislature, not have a say in appointment of the judges? Whereas the court says, let the judge take a call on who should be appointed as judge. Why should the legislature interfere? This is the debate. We will delve more into it. He also went on to say that the parliament, being the custodian of the ordainment of the people, was duty bound to address the issue and express confidence that it will do so. Like I told you, in Jaipur, Dhankar made a statement that we cannot have ostrich-like stance, which is the legislature cannot have an ostrich-like stance. Parliamentary sovereignty and autonomy cannot be permitted to be qualified or compromised as it is quintessential to survival of democracy. The more subtle the incursion, the more dangerous it is, he said. He said the legislature did not have the power to write judicial orders and the executive did not have the right to write judiciary orders also. He cautioned that, the one-upmanship and the public posturing of the judicial reforms which prevail today, he said that is not right. Okay, now let us come to last point that he made, which is also important. I cannot be the party of emasculating of the power of legislature, noting that he had been a soldier of judiciary. He was a lawyer before he became a politician. So he says he cannot be seen emasculating, taking away power from the legislature. He said, I cannot be seen doing that. Okay, so long and short of his point is that, listen, you know what? Boss, the legislature, like it interferes with administration, like it interferes with the executives, like it interferes with the appointment of executives, we should also interfere with the judicial. Because at the end of the day, legislature is supreme. Why? Because judiciary cannot take legislature for granted. Judiciary cannot question legislature. Judiciary cannot say, publicly posture and question legislature ke bhai aisa kaisa ho gaya. And why shouldn't judiciary involve in legislature? Finally, we are public representative. No, the legislature is public representative. People vote the legislature. No, he said. So why? How can we take away power from the legislature? Because technically what he is trying to say is, if you are taking away power from legislature, then aren't you technically taking away from the power from the people? Because it's the people's representative. ठीक है? To that extent, fantastic. To that extent, very correct. Now the point that one needs to understand is, you see, in a democracy, which he said we are a democracy. In a democracy, it is not the judiciary, neither the legislature, nor the administration that is superpower, that is supreme. There is no supreme. The supreme is the constitution. That's what is supreme. A legislature or the executive or the judiciary is almost the same. Each of them functions for each other. So the supreme technically is the constitution. This is number one. The number two point is, you see, if you look at the British Constitution gives lot of sovereignty to the legislature. To that extent, in British Constitution, the legislature is supreme. In American Constitution, on the other hand, judiciary is supreme. Judiciary is supreme. Now, the thing is, in India, consciously, we got the mixture of both. We gave equal impetus both to the legislature and the judiciary. This is how it is done. So, if that is the case, then the question of he is bigger than me and he is smaller than me doesn't arise, does it? Number one. Number two, correct. The legislature is, they are lawmakers. MP is called as a lawmaker, an MLA is called as a lawmaker. He is a lawmaker, he or she is a lawmaker. He is supposed to stand there and make laws. So, the point is, but then there is a problem. The problem is, if the legislature makes a law, should that law be final and unquestionable, supreme law? Can a democracy function that way? That's the question. I think no. And I will tell you why. You see, in a parliament or in an assembly, it is the majority that passes a bill and converts that bill into an act. Once the bill is converted into an act, it becomes from a bill, it turns to be a law. So, the majority creates a law. Now, if a majority thinks that, say for instance, Indian should only eat wheat. I'm giving an example. If Indian should only eat wheat, if the majority thinks, what about the minority who may want to eat rice? Democracy, mind you, is not majoritarianism. It is not. Democracy is where you have, of course, the majority keeps their views, but the minority's preferences and rights has also to be considered. So, if you have lawmakers and the majority starts creating laws, then the minority has no say. So, if the government that you vote into power doesn't come into power, the other government comes into power, then finally you have no say, you have nothing, you just live, you just take what is given to you. Your rights go away. That is when judiciary comes into play. That is when the courts come into play. That is when the Supreme Court comes into play. That's where you have the right to put up your case in front of the judiciary and say that while majority has taken a decision, but sir, ye humko takleef hota hai. That's the reason why court plays a role, and that is why it is imperative that you have an unbiased and independent court. That is why it is important. I said the first time, I am repeating it again. In a parliament, the majority passes the law. Okay? Majority means most probably it is the government, because the majority becomes the government finally, and therefore majority passes the law. The government passes the law. Now the government is controlled by whom? The government is controlled by a political party that has a certain manifesto, that has a certain ideology. That political party controls the government. Which means that when a government is formed, the political party that controls the government, their manifesto and their ideology is what is put into practice, what automatically converts into law. When you have a Bharatiya Janata Party driven so-called right-wing government, you will have laws like abrogation of Article 370, you will have laws like CAA, you will have laws like maybe tomorrow the Uniform Civil Code. All these laws will be put up because that is part of their ideology. Now one understands, majority believes in those ideology, and that is why majority votes for them, and that majority voting, and because of that majority voting, they come into the parliament. But now tell me, what happens? What happens to the minority? The minority who has not agreed to that ideology, do they go out from this country? Is that what we are saying? That's my question number one, which I asked you before. Now let's come to the point number two. See, my point number two is, finally, we say that a public representative goes there and becomes a lawmaker. So my representative goes to the parliament and becomes a lawmaker. Now this is an ideal state. This is what theoretically should be. I vote for him, coupled with the fact that he is doing good work and he is also representing a particular ideology, which means, for instance, he is currently with Congress. I vote for him. The next year, he jumps from Congress, or the next term, next election, he jumps from Congress to Bharatiya Janata Party. Now, mind you, when he was in Congress, he would have been the same person who went into parliament and opposed an Article 370, the abrogation of Article 370. He must be the same person. Now, the next time around, he realized Congress mein rehke kuch fayda nahi hai. I have to go to BJP. I will get some ministerial berth. I will get some power. So he jumps from Congress to BJP. I am giving you a scenario. This time around, the constituency is the same. So last time, this man voted against abrogation of Article 370, for instance. But this time, because he is in Bharatiya Janata Party, he votes for the Article 370. So who decides? Who decides what the constituency wants? Therefore, is the constituency being actually represented? So is he representing as a lawmaker? Is he representing the constituency? And he representing the constituency right? Does the constituency agree to every law that he goes and supports, which he has to support because he has to follow the whip of the government? I will tell you what I mean by that. I'll give you some figures. Okay. Now, according to ADR, 222 candidates from Indian National Congress joined other parties between 2014 and 2021. 153 candidates left BSP to join different parties in the same time. Between 2014 and 2021, 253 candidates out of the total of 1,133 recontesting candidates who switched political parties joined BJP, followed by 115 candidates who joined Indian National Congress and 65 candidates who joined the BSP. This is the story between 2014 to 2021. Just giving us rough figure. Almost 400 candidates jumped from one party to another party. Don't bother about which party, how and all that. That's not my topic of the day. Jump from one party to another. Recontesting candidate. Matlab, pichli baar, they were fighting for a completely different ideology and they were fighting for a completely different sets of manifesto. This time around, they are fighting for a completely different ideology and a completely different manifesto. A lot of them won. So finally, are they actually representing the people? This is the question that I want to ask. If they are not and there is an iota of doubt, don't you think that there should be another body that scrutinizes the laws that are passed in the parliament? Which better body you can have than the judiciary for that? So that's another very vital point that one needs to talk about. So end of the day, I think while of course there should be enough sovereignty given to the legislature for a democracy to function the way it is, but then it has to be followed through and through. Parliamentary committees has to be involved. All this also have to happen. But yeah, I do accept the fact that the legislature have to be given enough sovereignty. But I also would think that the judiciary also needs to be independent. The judiciary needs to have the right to correct or interfere wherever they think that there is some kind of a diversion from the constitution, because the judiciary cannot function in their own whims and fancies, can they? They function under the gambit of the constitution. So the judiciary should have the right to interfere wherever there is a need to interfere. Now, the one point that a lot of people have missed out from what the Honorable Vice President of India said, which I want to get to your notice, because that point seems to be something that nobody is speaking about, especially the government needs to be taken cognizance to this particular point which he said, where he said that people in the executive, legislature and holding senior political position must take care that the high constitutional office are kept away from political stands. We have noticed recently some serious observations of the transgression. We have also noticed serious cases of transgression when the governor of Tamil Nadu says that no, Tamil Nadu, no, it has to be Tamilagam. Isn't that transgression of powers. Governor is a constitutional position. And so many other cases where the governor has intervened, or whether one constitutional position or another has intervened. We have seen a lot of executive interfere in politician, come to aid of a political party. We've seen that too. Those transgression also needs to be debated. Those transgression also needs to be spoken about. So that's my point of view on this subject, and I hope I've put my points across. But the decision is finally yours, and I think you should have a point of view on this. Do write down those point of views. Do let me know what your point of views are, because these are matters that concerns you, me, and also our future generation. Till I see you next time, that is tomorrow at 10. Namaskar.
Now be the first to know about the latest updates on our new news app. Go on your Android or iOS, search for HW News Network. Download our app, choose the language you prefer to get updates in, and be up to date with the latest news.